Recognize Umbral Walker D01. Recognize the Caleb G D02.
Hello, team. Welcome to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files, episode 11. I am everyone's favorite sidekick, Caleb, and this is the worst death trap ever. Allow me to introduce Rich. We'll laugh about this one day. Howard. Thank you so much for joining us on this, our 11th episode. We absolutely appreciate your time and listenership. We are on iTunes. Please subscribe and rate. We would love you forever. If you want to get a hold of us, reach us on Twitter at the YJ Files, via email at whelmedpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, our website is crashingthemode.com.
You seem distraught.
Distraught? Bagan is dying! We have no powers, and I'm down to my last arrow! Of course I'm distraught!
Well, get trot or get dead.
How can you be so calm?
Practice. Been doing this since I was 9.
With that out of the way, I will turn things over to Rich for...
Hello, Megan.
Hey everybody, title of this episode is Homefront. The original release date was September 30th, again back on a weekly schedule after that 6-month hiatus. The in-episode date is September 22nd, starts in Gotham and then jumps to Mount Justice and stays in Mount Justice for this episode. The director was Michael Chang and the writer was Greg Weisman's brother, John Weisman. Any crazy voice talent in this one, Caleb? You're always good at pointing those out.
No, nothing beyond the regular, spectacular cast of Young Justice.
Absolutely.
Although I would like to point out the voice of Barbara is actually the voice of Barbara when we see her later as well. They did not recast her.
Oh, yeah, we do get that quick glimpse, right?
Mm-hmm. A very quick glimpse of Barbara. But enough of that. That might be crashing the mode. We need to get to mission briefing.
Just in time for your next mission.
Our pre-credit scene here, we open on Artemis in Gotham City waking up, and I guess it was the second chance we've gotten to see her room. We've seen nothing else of this apartment yet. There are 2 single beds in her room, in a very well-worn apartment. She opens up her eyes to see the bed across from hers, or next to hers, has an Alice in Wonderland poster above it, which gives us our nod to Cheshire, which we are finding out more about in this episode. She flashes back to 6 years before, when her older sister is packing to run away. The sister says something about their mother not getting out of prison anytime soon and not wanting to live in the house with their father, etc., etc. And then we pop back to the present where Artemis is woken up by her mother to get to her first day at Gotham Academy. We also cut to Aqualad talking to Red Tornado about the potential mole that we heard about that Sportsmaster mentioned a couple of episodes ago. Red Tornado leaving the cave for monitor duty and leaving the team by itself in the cave. And then finally, both Artemis and Robin arriving at the same Zeta Tube terminal in an abandoned phone booth. What I did skip here is that what Caleb was talking about is we also get to see briefly Dick Grayson, Barbara Gordon, Artemis, and Bet, who's kind of a minor supporting cast character in the Batman comics, all at Gotham Academy. After a bit of banter between Robin and Artemis, Robin mocking the fact that theoretically she should be in Star City if she's working with Green Arrow, but she's not. She's in Gotham. Oh, look at that. You're in Gotham. And he knew exactly who she was at Gotham Academy. So she's trying to cover her tracks badly, but clearly Robin knows her whole story at this point. They teleport to the Mount Justice. Robin goes first and then Artemis. And when Artemis shows up, Robin is under massive attack by both fire-wielding and water-controlling villains that they do not see.
So Artemis and Robin run from their attackers using every trick they have. We catch shadowy glimpses of their attackers, but nothing concrete. Robin manages to hack into cave security video only to discover that some kind of explosion took out multiple cameras. They hear Red Tornado calling out for them, but when Artemis breaks cover, she sees that it's not Red Tornado, but 2 other robots with very similar designs. Though they escape, they are told through the cave speaker system that their friends will be killed in 10 minutes if they don't surrender.
Artemis and Robin try to rescue the rest of the team, but fail pretty badly. They eventually come up with a plan to create an EMP using some of the equipment in Mount Justice to shut the robots down, but their plan to attach the EMP emitter to the main power generator fails because the circuit's incomplete. The emitter they built is not quite the right size. As they're trying to fix it, Robin gets knocked unconscious and captured by the robots, which leaves Artemis on her own, out of arrows, and very unsettled by the fact that her various superpowered allies were all taken down, and then the only non-powered ally, who is clearly more experienced than her, has also been taken down.
Then Artemis stumbles into Wally's souvenir room. She sees Cheshire's mask from the episode Infiltrator, and we get another flashback of Artemis's childhood, where Cheshire is leaving her behind in their abusive home, saying, in this family, it's every girl for herself. Artemis then sees the arrow she used to save Wally from a mazo in Schooled on the shelf next to the mask.
The next thing we see is the elevator opening up as Artemis is surrendering to the Reds, but we can see the arrow in her quiver. Before they take her bow from her, she manages to pull off some awesome acrobatics, dodging their blows, and makes a crazy, crazy shot across the cave, landing the metal arrowhead in the EMP emitter, completing the circuit that Robin was trying to fix, and then setting off the EMP explosion. That shuts the Reds down and allows her to wake Robin up and free the rest of her allies.
So the next scene is Red Tornado returning to the cave. He admits that he didn't know he had siblings, quote unquote. And when Tornado gets near the shutdown Reds, the EMP wears off. There's a spark between Red Tornado and Red Inferno. Tornado gets partially reprogrammed and immediately sucks all the air out of the cave, knocking the team unconscious. When they come to, the Reds and Red Tornado are gone.
There's some stuff in here, man.
Yeah, there is some stuff. Let's feel the aster.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the aster.
Robin.
Oh, Robin is so awesome in this episode.
Thank you for this Robin episode. We haven't gotten much Robin in a few episodes, and that's okay. I like the fact that it kind of jumps back and forth a little bit. We get to see that these sidekicks still have their other quote-unquote jobs, right? They're going to school. They're Robin sometimes in Gotham doing other things and not in Rhode Island. Yeah, it's great. Artemis and Robin are the only non-powered members of the team at this point, but yet Robin's the most experienced. And in this episode, you get to see Robin shine, but also the shining isn't just to show off Robin. The shining is also to make a really interesting point about Artemis. And Artemis's underlying anxiety about the fact that she doesn't have massive powers like Miss Martian or Superboy. Then Robin gets taken out. So now Artemis, not only did she have these superpowered allies taken down by these villains, she now is the only one left. And the clearly more experienced, more skilled Robin, maybe not more skilled, maybe, but definitely more experienced Robin is also down. So she has to pull it together and make a plan for herself. And it's a great character moment for the character, both in developing her own personal skills and abilities and confidence, but also in showing how much this team means to her and counterpointing this nod to the terrible childhood she had. So much character development in this episode. So though it's Robin, it's pretty much Artemis as well.
Yeah, they are very much on an even footing in this episode when it comes to screen time and a display of their skills. I think what's best about this episode is the difference between them. And the show very skillfully used that difference in their confidence to build the tension of this episode. This episode is really tense and at times kind of scary.
It is a little bit scary, yeah.
There are some really intense claustrophobic moments when Robin and Artemis are crawling through all the air vents and they're being attacked from all sides and we don't know what's going on.
Yep.
The Reds, even though we see them in silhouette and we see what they are doing, we don't see them on screen for about 9 or 10 minutes into this episode. We just see the devastation that they are wreaking on the team and the cave. And that makes them a very scary villain.
Yeah, and you know what? I remember specifically when I was watching this episode the very first time, I was like, I don't know what's happening right now, but is Aqualad trying to kill them? Like, I was, because, you know, the only character that we know of that's got these water control powers are Atlantean sorcerers and Aqualad, and we saw Aqualad getting taken out and some other stuff, and so I was super confused as to what was happening and what was going on. And the fact that Artemis is so focused on the fact that, look, they can drown us and we can't do anything about it. Another thing I love about this episode are the things, this puts an emphasis on things that Robin does, right? They do this thing with Robin. So you got a really big, strong character, right? Really big, strong villain. Robin comes straight at him, does some crazy acrobatics, looks like he gets his butt kicked, right? And he's thrown across the room. But then you realize, no, that's exactly what Robin wanted to do. Like, I'm going to actually plant bombs on your face, so please throw me across the room, because I don't want to be there when the bombs I put on you that you didn't realize go off in your face.
And there's another point later on when he's fighting the Reds and he's throwing his batarangs.
Yeah.
And he ricochets one of them, seemingly missing the shot. But we find out later that he was just getting a comms unit next to Wally.
Yeah, it almost hits Wally in the head, and he's like, whoa. And then later on, he's talking to Wally. And you're just like, God, I love this Robin so much. At one point, Red Torpedo fills a hallway full of water, so they could easily drown. Robin takes off his cloak, because that's clearly going to slow him down. He gets himself more hydrodynamic underwater. He pulls a rebreather out of the utility belt. He breathes himself. He grabs Artemis, puts it in her mouth, so that he's like, look, I got this. Like, don't start freaking out. Because that's a normal reaction to being drowning, right? So he puts the thing in his mouth, and then Torpedo shows up, grabs Artemis. They manage to get Artemis free from Red Torpedo, and then Robin fires his cable down the hallway into the wall underwater and pulls himself, along with Artemis, away from Torpedo. That scene could have been just fine, the way that it was. But then they cut back, and you realize that not only did he pull himself away, he left a trail of explosives behind him that explode and push Red Torpedo away from them. If they had just left it, if the writers had just left it with Rob pulling himself down the hallway, who cares? This character of Red Torpedo clearly is a water villain who's probably super fast. But Robin is thinking ahead. He's thinking those steps ahead, saying like, look, I can get away from you, but you're going to catch up to me, so I better do something else to give me as much time as humanly possible. Both characters of Artemis and Robin are pushing the envelope of working at their full capacity, and that's why it's so anxious in this episode. Like, you are like, nope, that's good. Oh no, Robin's really good, and he's still just barely staying ahead of them.
And I think what's important to note here is that even though Robin is so competent and so skilled at what he is doing, he is not immune to the emotions of what's going on.
Exactly. Oh, such a good scene.
There are a couple times where he reveals that, yeah, he's scared, he's freaked out, but his training has kicked in and he knows how to shut down his emotions and just focus on training.
Yeah. When Artemis says, what do we do next? And Robin just looks at her and says, we save them. That's how it works. This is the job. Welcome to the job. But that next scene, and we put it at the beginning of this episode for a reason, because Robin's calm and he's joking and he's doing the Robin thing, but you're starting to understand more about him as a character. He does this joking, almost like gallows humor, right? I've worked in an ICU, nurses who've worked in ERs, ER techs, cops, firefighters. They work in stressful environments, and you make jokes because you need to make jokes because you're dealing with death every day. You start to understand that Robin's parents died. There's a depth and a darkness potentially to this character, but as opposed to Batman, he's going the opposite direction. He's trying to lighten things up and reduce the stress so he can get the job done. But in this episode, when Artemis brings that up, like, how can you stay so calm? Or like, he's like, you seem distraught. And she's like, any normal human being would be distraught. And then he loses his cool, right? And you see that, look, yeah, I'm joking, but you better get it together or we're going to die, period. Do it. Get the job done. This is what we have to do. I'm not making light of this because it's not a stressful situation. I'm making light of this because we need to keep our heads together. God, just nailing the Robin I want to see on screen.
Just as a supporting detail here, we touched on this back in Infiltrator when Robin was running into one of the Wayne Enterprises building and he was rattling off
that's right.
some of those cool override codes.
Yeah, Wayne Tech override RG4.
Yep, he dropped a whole bunch of override codes in this episode, rapid fire.
Yeah, including RG4 again. He did the RG4 override. He did the HOJ Watchtower override. He did a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
The HOJ Watchtower override comes in later episodes. Somebody else uses it. I like the fact that they have this consistency.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I brought it up. Consistency of the character, consistency of how the technology works, consistency within the universe itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Let's touch on the Reds real quick here.
Yeah. There's a lot going on here, and I guess a little bit of it's probably going to be in Crashing the Mode. So I didn't know these characters, right? I'm like, I didn't know Red Tornado had siblings, and then we find out a little bit later that the way that the team, Greg Weisman and the creative team, Brandon Vietti, tied this into the greater DC universe is really interesting to me, putting a new twist on old established characters. And they're kind of horrifying. And the fact that they, at least Red Torpedo, they had him use the same voice as Red Tornado. That scene where Artemis ducks out of cover, they do a little slow motion thing where she's like so relieved that Red Tornado is there, and she comes out and they do the little slow-mo thing that you see in, like live action movies. But they took the moment to do the same dramatic tension trick to have her realize that she's walking in front of somebody who wants to kill her. It's great.
The Reds are very effective villains because we don't know who they are. We had no warning that this plot was occurring. There was no foreshadowing in future episodes. So the tension and the shock that Robin and Artemis are experiencing, we experience as viewers because we have no clue what's happening.
Yeah, the scene where Artemis comes out of the Zeta tube and there's smoke and fire and explosions everywhere, and Robin's all, get down! You're just like, whoa! What is going on? Amazing.
This shows what we've been talking about so many times, that Young Justice knows how to use emotions properly. We don't need an exposition of who these characters are ahead of time, because that would take away that fear. It would create a comfort for us as viewers, and we wouldn't experience these emotions. Young Justice knows how to show us. It knows how to build the emotional response that gets us as viewers invested in this animated show.
Yeah, it's taking that emotional ride that they want us to go on. Don't tell us about the ride. Let me get on, because I want to be there, and I want to experience it. It doesn't take just a good writer. It takes a good writer and a good director and a good editor and good animators to get this, and the voice actors. Like, there could have been, so there's that line where she says, how can you stay so calm? And Robin's response is, I've been doing this since I was 9. From a voice actor standpoint, that could have been delivered in a bunch of different ways. It could have been like, I've been doing it since I was 9. Super cheesy, upbeat, lifted. Instead, he's like, here's the unfortunate reality. I have been doing this on a daily basis since I was 9 years old, right? It puts a different oomph on it, in almost an edge in that darkness and that reality that we realize it's going on. That has to be delivered properly by the voice actor, and God, just nails it.
Yeah, the quality that every member of the team of Young Justice brings to the whole show, but this episode in particular, this is a heavy episode.
Yeah.
This is not something I would have expected from a typical Saturday morning cartoon. I mean, there's real danger, there's real fear, there's real tension. And so seeing this skill that the entire team has brought to this episode is just brilliantly amazing.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
So I think we've rambled on here enough. Let's see what Canary has for us in a debrief.
Stick around. Class is in session.
Thank you, Canary. There's a few things to pull from this, but I think I'm going to focus on a little bit of a role-playing situation here, which is it's not uncommon for players and characters around a table to feel inadequate compared to the other characters at the table. So depending on the system you're working, if it's a heavy crunch system with a lot of rules, typically you have somebody who knows the rules better than somebody else. Maybe a new player that doesn't know as much, or you just have one of those players we refer to as a min-maxer or a number cruncher, rules lawyer kind of a thing who knows how the ins and outs of the rules and can build a super effective character. In this particular case, you might have, whether it's the player who feels inadequate because it's like, well, I just have a normal character and I don't have invulnerability and I can't fly and that kind of stuff. And that's the character I want to play, but it just seems like Superboy and Miss Martian are so much better than I am. Whether it's the player saying that or whether the player is emphasizing that the character feels that way. You can have great character moments by doing maybe a side story, maybe a little one-shot, something that you can emphasize what that character happens to be really, really good at. You've had a bunch of combats and you have characters who are really good at combat, but somebody wants to play the bard character, or the creative character or the face character, and they just haven't gotten a lot of screen time. Give them a side story. In this particular case, the way I look at this from a gaming standpoint is you only had 2 players show up, and both of those players are the non-powered characters. Or you had one character show up, and you decide this is going to be an Artemis-focused episode, and I'll just play Robin as an NPC. I'm just going to set up a situation in which all of the other characters are in trouble. I don't need their players here to do this, and we'll do a little one-on-one. And then I'll just inform the other players, like, hey, this is what happened. You got captured, and blah, blah, blah. And, the player of Artemis saved you, or Artemis and Robin saved you, and that's all they really need to know. There's nothing else. And here's the major plot point. The major plot point is Red Tornado takes off because he's been reprogrammed. So giving your character screen time, both as character growth potential moments, but also making sure that the player feels like their character build, that it sounded fun to them, the story that they wanted to tell, wasn't a bad choice.
Yeah, absolutely. As a game master, I feel it's your responsibility to make sure everyone at the table is having fun and make sure that everyone has their moment to shine and have an impact on the story.
Mm-hmm.
This episode, if we look at it in game terms, is very much a development of Robin and Artemis's character, but it's also where they got their spotlight moment.
Yep.
That final shot that Artemis made.
Yeah, crazy shot. Love it.
From the standpoint of watching a television show, you knew it was going to land. You knew that the plot needed it to connect.
Yep.
But there was still tension. There was still surprise.
So for me watching it, it's like, well, of course she's going to make the shot. That wasn't the stress or the interest. That wasn't the thing that drew my interest. What drew my interest was, of course she's going to make the shot. And in making the shot, how is this going to change Artemis as a character?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It wasn't the question of whether the shot was going to land. It's the question of what are the consequences of her making the shot in both a positive, maybe negative way, but in this case, a positive way.
And from a tabletop standpoint, sure, that's probably like a crit. She rolled a 20 to land that shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as a game master and even as a player, think bigger. What's happening in the story more than just, I rolled my attack and I got the number I needed? What is that consequence? What is that development that this success or even failure does to the story?
Right. Or is it about a die roll in the first place? What is the through line of the story that you're telling in this particular case? You could say that, oh, look, you've saved up so many aspects in a fate game that you're clearly going to make the shot. Or even in a D20 binary system of success failure die rolls, you could say like, oh no, you're going to make the shot. Let's talk about what the consequences of making the shot are. How does this let your character grow? Having the dice help you determine random things is fantastic. But on something like this, I might consider stacking the deck in the player's favor for sure, based on various things, letting them use in a D&D 5e game, maybe using inspiration, or letting other characters at the table use their inspiration to help them to make sure that she makes that shot. Because the whether she makes the shot isn't the interesting part, right? So maybe let that go.
Yeah. Just like in this episode, what was interesting was Artemis making the choice to return. She flat out said, I could run away. I could wait for the League to show up, but my family would die.
Yep.
That was the moment that mattered. Her making the choice to risk her life to save these people that she has just met and just been working with. That's why the flashbacks were so important, because now we know that Artemis has a lot of issues with her family, and she's dealt with so much loss. Making the choice to say, no, I am standing with my family even though I might die, that makes that choice important. That's why that scene matters. Not that she did a cool acrobatic flip and shot her arrow all the way across the cave. It was coming back, coming down the elevator. That was the climax.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even in writing, that's important too, right? In writing, creating the framework for those scenes to exist is very, very important.
Making sure you understand what the point of the scene is that you're writing. And the point of the scene may not be a thing. I have a very good friend of mine who is a young adult author. Her name is Mary G. Thompson. She writes some great books. She and I have very different writing styles. I'm a plotter and planner ahead of time, and she just sits down and has an idea and writes a book. Now, she writes the book and then sometimes looks at the book and says, what is this book about I just wrote? And it's like, I think it's about what happens in chapter 12. Like, that's the thing that jumps out. Let's tweak and edit and do these extra drafts to make sure that the story is tight enough to know what that through line is for those scenes. Make sure the scenes are focused on that. In the case of this particular episode, we get all kinds of things coming together to a head. We get a reminder that she saved Wally. We get the callback and the setup of the fact that there is one arrow left and that she can find it. There's a lot of things that become key in this. And we also get to see Kid Flash's tech skills, helping with Robin build the EMP emitter, and you just get a lot of great stuff. Anyway, so let's crash some modes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us something we don't know yet.
Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
In crashing the mode, we are, of course, talking about spoilers specifically for Young Justice, but also the DC universe in general, with foreshadowing, Easter eggs, and flat-out revelation of facts that we will see later. If you are experiencing Young Justice for the first time along with us and you do not want to be spoiled, please stop listening and come back a little later. If you are here, we're going to crash the mode.
In this episode, there's only a couple things, really. There's not like major revelations here. It's a lot of character development for these characters to help move them forward. But the only thing that we're going to see in the future is this thing we nodded to earlier, which is the Reds, right? Where did these characters come from? Were they brand new characters for the show, or what happens to them? And later on, we find out in the storyline as the League is hunting Red Tornado down, and we get the wrap-up of this particular subplot, that Red Torpedo is actually a character from the Justice Society era of comics, and the Red Inferno character is actually Firebrand. And Firebrand was another classic Justice Society member who I was a big fan of. Both of those characters had humanoid appearances because Tio Maro built them to infiltrate the Justice Society to collapse them just the way that he did with Red Tornado. But in their cases, because he made them so human looking and acting, they were too human. And that was a problem. They had these internal conflicts. So the third try was creating a robot that knew it was a robot, that wanted to learn about human nature, but was so alien from humans that it was more like an external view of understanding human nature as opposed to pretending to be human. So in a way, this parallels the storyline that you see in Marvel Comics with Ultron's creation being kind of an infiltrator and a taker-downer, I don't know, it's the terrible word, of the Avengers. And here it's Tio Maro creating Red Tornado to infiltrate and take down the Justice League and then having him become a hero instead. Justice Society, not Justice League. But it also tells you that Red Tornado has been around a really long time.
And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot more in this episode to talk about with spoilers and foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Like you said, Rich, this is a very focused character development episode.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And like I said with the last episode about the Belle Rev episode, Young Justice is proving it can do another type of show right now. It can do an even more focused, very narrow type of story. And it's still really exciting and really good.
Yeah.
I think another important thing to talk about, and we talked about this very briefly before we started recording this episode, the Reds are a different threat than the light.
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Yeah.
You and I have been debating here whether or not the reds factor into what the light is doing. And I think at the surface level, I personally do not believe that they are part of the light and part of the light's plan. And I like that because it shows that there are still other threats in the world of Young Justice. And not everything can be tied back to the crutch of the big bad.
Right. Clarion, at one point, when Ivo shows up, Clarion's like, I didn't order this because he wanted Teomaro, but Ivo was like, oh, well, I'm better than him anyway. It's all good. It acknowledges the fact that they both exist and they both have kind of a parallel villain abilities. But it does say that the light kind of wanted Teomaro, but didn't get to Teomaro. And we find out a little bit later as to kind of why that's the case, which is the fact that Teomaro existed and was trying to take down the Justice Society back in the 30s and 40s. He's old. And the Teomaro we see in the show turns out to be an android, which is a bit of a shocker when we see it a little bit later, because it's a pretty disturbing scene for a second until you realize, oh, wait, he's an android. So he's almost dead, literally dead in a hospital bed. So there's no way that they can use him. But it still ends up being this side story that kind of feeds in a little bit. I don't know. Let's explore that a little bit later down the line when we get closer to those episodes.
Definitely. Anything else here we need to discuss in this Crashing the Mode?
No, I think this mode is a little bit crashed.
Okay, let's move on to some fan service.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so last episode and this episode and previous episodes apparently are a GT Grandom Admiration Society. So I have two things to say. There is 2 takes on the song Lost Boy by Ruth B. that are Robin related. One of them is from our friend GT Grandom, which is fantastic, and it's a shorter one, but I think he did a really good job of focusing on the emotional punch. And then the other one is from a Kayla McCormick. It takes a longer version of the song, and I believe it's a live recording version of the song, and really dives in and pulls from other animated shows as well, including The Batman, Young Justice, that kind of thing. Both of them are fantastic. I highly recommend you go check them out. It's a really poignant song, actually, and really applies to Robin's situation quite well. So go check those out.
Of course, those links will be in the show notes for this episode specifically. We will also have them on our resources page over at crashingthemode.com. If you create any fan art or fan work about Young Justice, please get a hold of us. And of course, in every episode, we are talking about cool things that fans have done about Young Justice. So please get in touch with us, Twitter, email, the website, so that we can have a chat, maybe get you featured, maybe do something cool together. And with all of that being said and done, I think it is time to wrap up this mission and head out of the cave. Thank you so much for your time. We absolutely appreciate you deciding to spend time and listen to us here today talk about the Young Justice. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time, and feel the Aster.
And don't forget to hashtag Keep Binging YJ on Netflix, and stay whelmed.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our computer is voiced by Madison Ray. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.